Sharks. We love them. We hate them. They're toothy, scary, beautifully, and seemingly everywhere. Hi, I'm John Torres, engagement editor at Florida Today in Brevard County. And it has been my pleasure this week to lead our Shark Week efforts here on the Space Coast, where our reporters spoke to experts in the field to write more than 25 stories appearing on our website this week. So many things I learned, like a Greenland shark can live to be 500 years old. Shark attacks may determine who wins the White House in November. Yep, I'm not kidding. And the coconut tree in my front yard is more likely to kill me than a shark. We wanted to cap off this week by doing a live panel with two of the top shark experts in Florida. But first, I'd like to welcome my co-host, Molly Barrows, reporter at the Pensacola News Journal. Welcome, Molly. Hello. Our experts are Grant Gilmore, senior scientist with Estuarine, Coastal, and Ocean Science, who is here in audio only right now as he's having some problems with his camera, but we appreciate him being here. And he's also authored more than 70 papers on the ecology of fish. We also have Professor Stephen Kajura of Florida Atlantic University, who runs the Shark Lab, and he's joining us from a ecological nature conference in Pittsburgh. So we really appreciate him joining from his hotel room. I'm going to start with you, Stephen, if that's okay. Why do you think we're so fascinated with sharks, and what exactly is a shark lab?
Yeah. So my lab is called the Shark Lab just because that's the main study organism that we look at. We look at the biology of sharks and their relatives, things like stingrays, manta rays as well. They're all closely related. And I think one of the reasons that we find them so interesting is simply the fact that they are they're large fish, and they have this reputation as being fish that can bite you and do damage. Now, if you're a little dicky fish like this, it's fine, but no one really cares, right? It's just not that interesting. But if you have a fish that's the same size as you, suddenly it's big. Suddenly it's interesting. There's a reason we find marlins interesting, big tunas, big billfish, and sharks interesting is because they're big animals. And then if you add on to that, the fact that sharks have this reputation of biting people sometimes, it makes us even more interested. Hey, suddenly we're not the top animals anymore. Suddenly there's something else out there that could best us when we're in the water.
Gotcha. That's perfect. Thank you so much for that. Grant, I'm sorry that we can't see you. I know you have some shark jaws with you that you wanted to show us. I know that you do a lot of research with the Indian River Lagoon, which is a breeding ground for bull sharks. Can you tell us a little bit about why they use the Indian River Lagoon and what is the state of sharks there? Uh-oh. Are we not hearing Grant? Did we lose him? Live TV, folks. Sorry. Molly and I do have some songs prepped to entertain you guys just in case.
Can I weigh in a little bit on that while we're waiting for Grant to come back?
Yeah, sure. Please, yes.
Now I will point out that Grant's the expert here. And when I was just starting my master's degree back in '92, I got to meet Grant Gilmore at that time. So I've had the pleasure of knowing him for the last, 30, 40 years now. It's an awful long time. So it's a delight for me to be on the same panel with him. But one of the things that I remember from way back then, was that the Indian River Lagoon was established as this nursery habitat for bull sharks. The females would come in up to the rivers that were dumping in, and they would give birth to their young. And a lot of the young would stay there in these river habitats, these freshwater habitats, for the first year or two, until they grew up, and then they'd move out into the Indian River, and then eventually out into the ocean and join the adult population. But that's what's one of the cool things about the bull sharks, is that unlike most sharks, they're able to go all the way up into freshwater and spend time there. And the juveniles basically live in freshwater for the first year or so. And I think that's, again, one of the interesting aspects about sharks. They're not all the same. There's a lot of differences, and different sharks have different skill sets, let's call them, different attributes that they're able to contribute. And I'm sure Grant has more to say about the biology of bull sharks within the IRL itself.
Are you there, Grant?
Yes, I'm here.
So I was asking about that. I know that you've done a lot of research on in the Indian River Lagoon, breeding ground for bull sharks. Can you tell us a little bit about the state of sharks there right now?
Well, first of all, the lagoon is not in the best of shape, and I think everybody knows that. And I think everyone has to recognize that the sharks are, whatever's happening to the lagoon is happening to the sharks, okay? And it's also happening to our fisheries and us. We're all in this together. And the bull shark's part of an ecosystem. It's spent its first 7 to 8 years in the lagoon. So whatever's happening with the food sources in the lagoon, and seagrasses turned out to be one of the primary sources of organisms in the lagoon, and it had the highest biodiversity. And my dissertation was actually on seagrass fishes in the lagoon, and a lot of the seagrass is gone. And with that, the food source for bull sharks, and not only bull sharks, but many of these fishes use the seagrass as a nursery, then they migrate offshore as adults. So there's a biomass missing offshore that normally would have been there for higher level predators. And I think the bull shark's probably receiving the worst of it because we have all kinds of problems in freshwater with toxins. And that probably has led to the decline of seagrass as well. And of course, using freshwater in the lagoon as a nursery has probably impacted that particular species more than some of the others.
Mm. All right, I'm going to jump to Molly here for a second, because I know that Molly, she covered a very high-profile shark attack several years ago when she was a TV reporter, I believe, right, Molly? Can you
Yep.
talk about that and experiences in reporting something like that?
Sure. Yeah, that was I remember that night. It was a wild night. It was July 6th of 2001. I was working for a local television station, and that was back, I know you'll remember this, John, but when we used to listen to scanners in the newsroom, right? And so there was the call that went out, and it was said animal bite on Fort Pickens. And so that's the beach that's just down from Pensacola Beach on Santa Rosa Island. It's federal parkland. And this would have been a little bit past evening time. So anyway, I'm thinking snake, fox, animal bite, whatever. It's a slow night. Next thing you know, the scanner traffic's going off, shark attack, bull shark's been shot, kid's had his arm bitten off. It was just wild. And I'm talking about 8-year-old Jesse Arbogast visiting from Ocean Springs, Mississippi with his family. And his uncle was fishing in a shallow area, just knee-deep water. And, I'm sure those two experts know far more than I do. But what I've since learned, of course, is that morning and evening is really their feeding time, and they can't see as well, if you will. So I think he just thought little Jesse Arbogast was dinner, and he took off his arm and a big chunk out of his leg. And that's like warm bath water at that time of year. And he bled out so quickly. And it was such a dramatic scene. They managed to get the boy to shore. They start performing CPR on him. They call for help. Life flight arrives, takes this boy to the hospital, but his arm is still in the shark's mouth. The uncle literally wrestles this shark to shore because, mind you, it's kind of a shallow area in between like two sandbars, if you will, the beach, and then it's like a sandbar that's close by. So the shark is semi-trapped from what I understood at the time. But anyway, he manages to get this bull shark to shore. It's 200 pounds, over 7 feet long. A park ranger shows up, shoots the shark to death.
Wow.
It was still breathing and heaving on the beach when we got there with the live truck. So it's the craziest thing. I mean, I'm like, hey, behind me is a shark that's barely alive. And I couldn't believe it was even still alive, honestly, on the beach. But they pried it open with the jaws open with a baton, and they reached in there and got his arm out. So Jesse Arbogast, I know, it's crazy. So they life flighted him, and they took his arm by ambulance. But because it was so warm, the water, he bled out so fast, and he lost a lot of blood to his head. But he survived. He just had some brain damage, and he's still living in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. He's disabled, has some difficulty communicating. But it was a wild story. It went national, and it really kicked off what they called the Summer of the Shark. because there were other attacks that year. A New Yorker had lost his leg in the Bahamas, and then a couple of weeks later on Pensacola Beach, a surfer claimed to have been bitten by a shark attack, but there was a little bit of like, was it, or were you looking for a headline? You know, so
Right.
but it is. It's going. I thought that was interesting what he was saying about bull sharks, because you know they have such a scary sounding name, and certainly when you attack when a young boy's attacked, people think, my God, this is terrible. These guys are such horrible predators, these sharks. But at the same time, that's where they live, and you know.
Right. Exactly. I mean, if you go into a jungle that has like tigers in it, you're at
Right.
risk. Molly, I think you have a question for Grant, right? Next.
Yes, Grant. What are some of the greatest risks that you see for sharks in and around Florida? You talked about basically their habitats deteriorating in certain ways. Does that impact all sharks, or you talked about bull sharks maybe being particularly affected by those breeding grounds? But are there other threats to sharks as well in general?
Well, because of the association with estuaries and fresh water, and we've had our greatest problems in freshwater and estuaries. I think the bull comes up first in that, but I think all sharks are affected if we have changes in nearshore water quality, estuarine production, because a lot of the production from our estuaries, including Pensacola Bay, Escambia Bay up there, is exported to the continental shelf. And so those food resources, if they decline or they become toxic, they're going to influence everything out on the continental shelf. And it'll not only be sharks, but it'll be everything out there. Looking at mercury content in sharks and dolphins is an example of that. Being able to trace this heavy metal and how it goes through the full food chain, and we see it in sharks. I want to mention, though, because the bulls are getting a bad rap here,
Yeah.
is that the Indian River Lagoon has been a nursery site for bulls and I've been here 50 years looking at the lagoon. It's a good thing you can't see this gray-haired old guy here. but there's, to my knowledge, and maybe Stephen could correct me, but there's never been an attack on a person in the lagoon. We have plenty of wade fishermen that go in the lagoon and people playing in the lagoon, at least we had in the past. And I don't know of any attacks on people that took place in the lagoon. And the lagoon's not very large. It's you're putting all your fish together with the people. So I always thought that was remarkable.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of any attacks there as well. Although I had a friend who stepped on a stingray in the lagoon and had a very nasty, barb or whatever it is reaction to it. Had to go to the hospital. Actually worked at the paper. Which, so like Stephen, I think you've done a lot of your work is on rays, right? How are rays related to sharks? I think somebody told me that they were once the same species and they evolved into I don't know if that's true or not, but could you talk about that, and why should we care about rays?
Sure. So yeah, you're right. I've done work on rays for a long time. In fact, my first graduate degree was at Florida Tech, working on stingrays in the Indian River Lagoon. And so we were out there collecting, and sure enough, it's something I had to watch out for. I had one of the students who did get stung by a stingray while we were collecting, and it just emphasized to us how careful you need to be around these animals. Now, sharks and rays have had a common ancestor literally tens to hundreds of millions of years ago. So it's not like they're closely related. They had a common ancestor a long time ago, and they are still in the same class. They're called elasmobranch fishes, which they're characterized by a skeleton that's made of cartilage instead of bone, like us. And they have internal reproduction, so the male will actually deposit sperm within the body of the female, which is like mammals, but unlike most fishes just broadcast their gametes into the water, right? And so sharks and rays have a bunch of characteristics that link them and make them very similar to each other, but they've gone on their separate evolutionary trajectories for a long time. And basically, you can think of them as sharks are just rays that have been wrapped up in a tubular form, or rays or sharks that have been flattened out into a
Right.
flat disc form. whichever way you want to look at it. And so all the bits and pieces, all the anatomy is there. It's similar between them, but they just have these different body shapes, and they've diversified. When you say rays, it can vary from a little stingray that you would see in the IRL to like a giant manta ray that you would see off the coast. And you have some that live in, very shallow water like that, like, knee-deep water. And you have some like skates, which are similar. They're similar to rays. They're deep. They can be found in very deep water as well. And so they're widely distributed in all sorts of different habitats. But sharks and rays, although they are related, they're distantly related. Think of it like, we're related to, I don't know, horses. We're both mammals, right? So we're related to them, but you wouldn't mistake a human for a horse. Let's hope not.
Right.
Definitely not.
Stephen, one time I was in Cocoa Beach, and it was like dusk, and I was just walking on the sand with my kids, and I thought there were two dolphins right by the shore, but they were, ray wings, I guess, that were coming up. And I just couldn't believe the size of this thing so close to shore. That's kind of scary to know that those are like right out there where we swim.
It's really interesting. We see these, we do these aerial surveys all the time in my lab where we fly along the beach to count the numbers of sharks and how many there are and where they're distributed. But we also see things like eagle rays and manta rays. And I'm always surprised, big manta rays that are like, 8 feet across, they're in water no more than like 8 to 10 feet from the beach, and you don't think of that because you think they're so big, you would expect them to be farther off. But sometimes they can be found, right in the shallows. And when they flap their wings, the wings can come up on either side like that. And it looks like, pointy little fins.
Yeah.
And the same thing for eagle rays. They do the exact same thing. You see the little points sticking out of the water, and it looks just like shark fins or dolphin fins slicing through.
Wow. Well, I think we lost Grant again. And, talking about large rays in so close, I want all of my big fish way, way out there deep where I don't, have to run into them. But I think Molly.
The good thing about manta rays is they're filter feeders, and they don't have a stinger that's going to nail you. So, if anything that's that big, that close, that would be a good one to have.
Oh, okay. All right. Good to know.
Okay. Stephen, we talked a little bit about, sharks needing protection. Do they need it? What are what are they experiencing? Are their numbers going downhill? Grant touched on that somewhat as far as some of the struggles that they're having. How serious is it when it comes to sharks, and are they endangered? Are certain species more endangered than others? And are governments doing enough to protect them?
So with shark conservation, it's really a mixed bag. Different species are more vulnerable than others, and some are doing better than others. So there's no simple, easy answer. It's more like a case-by-case basis. But in general, the overall trend worldwide is that shark populations are not doing well. Sharks are exploited at a rate that's non-sustainable. And so even if you were to, stop fishing altogether, it would take a long time for the populations to rebound and build back up to, to historic levels. But I will say that at least for some species, there is, good federal management, and populations are actually robust. So things like the blacktip sharks, for example, those things are managed at a federal level, and there are enough of them around that they're not really in any real danger. The population is doing just fine. And so in for other species, however, it's simply not that, not that clean an answer. Things like hammerheads, a lot of those are crashing rather dramatically. And so I'm sorry, pardon me?
Oh, I was just saying that's so sad. I was curious as to why. You hear some cultures go after them for different reasons, but I just was curious what the why was.
Yeah, and a lot of it has to do with different sharks being more susceptible to fishing than others. So, for example, a lot of fishermen may be out there trying to catch swordfish or tuna or something, but they catch a shark instead. They don't want that. They, take it off the hook and let it go. But in the meantime, that shark has been traumatized. It's been subjected to a lot of physiological stress. So even when it is released alive, it might not survive that encounter. and that's called incidental bycatch, or bycatch mortality, where you don't want to catch sharks. You catch them while you're searching for something else, but in the process, the shark is still it doesn't survive past that encounter, and that's where a lot of the shark populations are going down, not because people are targeting them necessarily, but because they're being caught and in other fisheries, and they just simply don't survive that catch effort.
Oh, I think we have Grant back on. Grant, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. You and I spoke about this a little bit ago. We've written some stories about shark fishing from shore, and the whole Jesse story that Molly relayed earlier. But some of the of what these anglers are doing is not legal. They're chumming from the shore, and they're obviously trying to lure in larger sharks. I'm assuming like the tiger sharks. Can you tell us about the time that you had to help a coroner ID the type of shark that killed the young boy? And are we tempting fate here in Brevard? In other words, are the anglers increasing the chances for a near-shore fatal attack if they're bringing in these larger sharks by chumming?
Well, I believe so, and it's based on the last 20 years of experience and some of the increases in attacks locally. I did get a call from a coroner about 1998 to come down and tell them about the local species of sharks, and I took my jaw collection down and showed them the different dentition and how they might be able to tell something from the scars. Well, they came to consensus. They said, but you're going to examine the body to verify. We aren't going to tell you what our consensus was. Well, it turned out it was a tiger, and the scar pattern, and I was going to show you with the jaws. So the tiger shark has a symmetrical bite. The dentition in the upper jaw is very similar to the dentition in the lower jaw, whereas the bull shark has cutting teeth in the upper jaw and holding or puncturing teeth in the lower jaw, so it's an asymmetrical bite. You can't tell this in all sharks, but the tiger is very diagnostic. And later on, they called me again, and there was another young man who was attacked in the same way and was also killed here in Vero. And then we had a German tourist who was attacked and miraculously saved by a medevac helicopter that happened to be flying over and saw the attack, and then others on the beach that saved her and gave her IVs right away. And that was a tiger as well. And all these were not too far off the beach. Now, one thing about our setting is we have a large number of sea turtles that nest along the shore here from the Cape south to Palm Beach. And one of the favorite preys of the tiger shark are sea turtles. And so we have at least the commercial fisheries taught me early in the 70s and 80s that tigers were often caught on long lines off here in fairly large numbers, 70 on a single set, indicating we had pretty good populations of tiger sharks here. And I'm sure there must have been some seasonal component to that in association with sea turtles. But if the sea turtles are nesting on the beach and we're swimming on the beach, you don't want to attract, additional large animals to the beach, particularly when the swimmers are there. So I think if you catch a black tip, you can catch a black tip fishing for mackerel or pompano or anything else. But if you deliberately go after a large shark from the beach, I don't think that should be permitted.
Yeah. One time I was with my kids on the beach here in the Atlantic, and it's like the kind of shoreline where you walk in for about 5 feet, and then there's a little rut, and then it like rises up again. And one of the guys that was fishing caught a mackerel or a Spanish mackerel or something, and his buddy said, "You should leave it on the line because sharks love that." And I swear it must have been within 10 seconds, there was a big 5-foot shark in that little channel, like thrashing after that bait. I just couldn't believe how quick he was there. He was obviously in the area. It's frightening. But,
along those lines, if I could just jump in for a second.
Of course.
We also see, our lab has been called several times by local law enforcement or the beach patrol to say, hey, there's a dead shark that's washed up on the beach here. And when we go there, sure enough, there's like a large hammerhead or a large tiger shark that's dead and has a fresh hook in its mouth still, typically. So this is from people who've been fishing out on the beach at night, and they may cut it and let it go, but it doesn't survive. And so the fact that they are fishing right off the beach and bringing these large tiger sharks, etc., in, and also after they let them go, the sharks aren't making it. And so just cutting the line and letting it go doesn't necessarily mean that the shark is going to survive. Especially hammerheads are particularly susceptible to any sort of fishing pressure. They're have such a delicate physiology. They just don't do well after struggling on a line for a while.
What can we do, John? What can we do to help?
I think Grant wanted to jump in.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and the smaller sharks, such as black tips and sandbars, they can make it. You can get them back in the water typically and inadvertently, but that would be the difference in controlling what's being caught on the beach. If you're chumming and wanting to catch a large tiger for a world record, I don't think that's a good idea. And I don't think that should be permitted. But a lot of these guys are coming down here just to do that, to catch the largest shark possible from the beach.
So Molly, was Jesse's uncle chumming, do you know, or was he just throwing the line out?
There was a rumor that he had been chumming the water and shark fishing, but that was not true. He was just fishing regularly, and it was timing, the evening when they were feeding, and he happened to catch one. But I don't know what he was using for bait, but that was a rumor for a long time.
Gotcha.
Well, especially at dusk like that, when the visibility is poor, that's when sharks have a harder time distinguishing, like maybe the shiny palm of your hand catching the light looks like a little bait fish, and they could come in and bite. But especially if you have a big shark, like that bull shark, I mean, when they come in and investigate, their jaws are so big, their teeth are so big, they can do a tremendous amount of damage, especially for a little kid. A lot of tissue damage can be done with just a little bite. Little bite on the part of the shark, but it's huge for the child.
And I would say that's most of the attacks that I've covered. And it's not like I've covered a bunch of them, but over the years, myself, other reporters have covered more minor attacks, I would say, that would happen either early in the morning or in the evening at feeding time, and they just mistake a person. And most of the time it might be a small chomp, if you will, to sort of check it out, and then they go on. But like you said, if you're made of teeth, you're going to do more damage, even if it's just an exploratory bite. So, but it's sad to hear that they're suffering like that. And is there anything that we can do, whether it's recreational fishermen or governments? Is there more that can be done to protect these sharks?
The one good thing is that the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission put into effect regulations that require anyone fishing for sharks from the shore to take one of the online courses that FWC offers. So they won't issue you a permit to do shore-based shark fishing until you've completed their training course. And so hopefully that encourages people to do that. It does provide a bit of enforcement teeth, but who's to say that people are actually doing it, right? A person could still go out fishing without being properly trained and educated on how to safely handle the animals. And if they don't get caught, well, they don't get caught. They've gotten away with it.
The last 6 days, we've had 4 bites reported in Volusia County, which is the shark bite capital of the state, I guess, or of the country. In your opinion, in either Grant or Stephen can answer this, is that like migrating sharks? Is that a school of black tip sharks in the area, or what would you attribute 4 bites in 6 days to?
So I have my opinions, but Grant, do you want to weigh in first, or what do you want to do?
Well, I really enjoy hearing yours, Stephen. But years ago, when I came to Harbor Branch, this is about 50 years ago, right away somebody came to the lab with a wound from a shark, a surfer. And I said, oh, I grew up in Sarasota, the Gulf Coast. That was not like this, and I kept on having these surfers show up with puncture wounds, and to the point that I started that's when I started looking at the dentition patterns and that sort of thing. And I said, well, um, if we don't have 15 or 20 bites like that in a year, something's wrong out there. And that was between Volusia County and Palm Beach County, I guess, along the coast there. I don't know what the seasonal component, Stephen can address that, but there was a tendency for me to see more in during the migratory period where we had heavy surf's up, surfers are in the water, and that would be in the fall and also in the spring. And so you're putting the sharks and the surfers together, and so, but I didn't see any fatalities at that time. I don't remember any fatalities for the first 20 years or so, and I think something's going on. It's a little different now, and I've been away from it, so it'd be interesting to hear what Steve thinks about the present situation and what's happened in the last, say, 20 years.
Right. Well, you're exactly right. The peaks in shark bites are in the spring and in the fall, and that corresponds to when you have a lot of these sharks like the blacktips migrating. So blacktip sharks, for example, they're going to spend the winters down in South Florida off Palm Beach, and then they'll be there January through March or so. And then once the water starts to warm up, yeah, they're snowbirds. That's exactly what they are. And once the water starts to warm up, they head north. And we now know that they're going as far north as New Jersey and Long Island, like New York, right? So that's exactly what they are. They're snowbirds. So they're up there in the summertime, and then when the winter comes, when the autumn comes, they start to move down for the winter again. And so you've got this this migration of these sharks going north along the coast of Florida in the spring, and then coming back south along the coast of Florida in the fall. And so that's exactly what Grant was saying. You've got these seasonal peaks in abundance of sharks, because that's when you've got a bunch of surfers in the water, a bunch of sharks in the water at the same time. And so necessarily you're going to increase the chances of bites. But what we've seen recently, in the last couple of weeks, right? We've seen several bites in Florida. There was some in Texas. There've been a lot of bites just in just a short period of time. And a lot of that can be attributed to basically right now it's summertime. The children are out of school. People are going to the beach. We've had a record warm year, warm summer. And then we had several bites over the Independence Day weekend because, well, it's a great time to go to the beach. And so with so many people in the water at this time of year, and lots of bait fish in the water, lots of sharks near the shore, you are just increasing the probability that something's going to happen and someone's going to end up being bitten. So I think that's one of the factors that's coming into play. The other factor I think that is coming into play is that we have a much more connected world now. So whereas someone bitten off Padre Island might have been local news in Texas for a couple of days, now with social media, that's on Facebook, it's on YouTube, it's on whatever, and people all around suddenly hear about this, and it makes it appear that there's this rash of shark bites all of a sudden, because we hear about these ones and these ones and these ones, when in reality it's probably always been like that. We just didn't know. We simply didn't have that sort of instant communication, that sort of connection worldwide that allowed us to share this information so readily, and it makes it appear that there's been this rash, but we are basically on track for the number of shark bites for this time of year compared to historical records.
And it seems like so much more, So can either Stephen or Grant or both of you tell our viewers something really cool about sharks or rays that maybe they don't know? Like, I was blown away that Greenland shark was like dated to be 500 years old, or whatever. I mean, he was here like before the American Revolution took place. He's swimming around, just mind-boggling. But yeah.
Oh man. Well, there's so many fun little trivia bits and pieces you could throw out there. I think one of my favorites is sharks can detect electric fields. It's a sense that we don't have. So they can see, they can smell, they can hear, they can all the same things that we can do. But they can also detect the weak electric field produced by a prey item. So like a little fish or a little crab, right? It buries under the sand. So you can't see it, you can't smell it, it doesn't make any noise or anything. It's hidden, but it's still producing an electric field around its body because the concentration of chemicals inside the body is different than the seawater, and it's leaking out ions at all times. So it's creating this charge. And sharks are able to use their exquisitely sensitive electrosensory system to find these buried prey items, even if they're completely obscured from all the other senses. And I think that's cool. I think that's a particularly neat trick that sharks and rays and their relatives are able to use to find their prey.
Well, I found it really interesting that after the movie Jaws came out, I heard this, I don't know if it's true or not, but after the movie Jaws came out, the price of shrimp went way up, and that's because there was an increase in shark fishing. Everybody wanted to catch a shark now, and shark eat the fish that eat the shrimp. And so if you don't care about sharks, but you like your shrimp, then you should care about sharks too, right? So with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. We've lost Grant again. I'm sorry, folks. He's a really interesting guy. He had some real technical issues. I want to thank Molly Barrows from the Pensacola News Journal for being here and sharing her stories and her insight, and Professor Stephen Kajuta, who joined us from a conference in Pittsburgh. So we really appreciate it. Care about the environment, please. Take care of our world. We only get one shot at this. We don't want to live on Mars. I know that the space people are talking about setting up a base on Mars. I don't want to live on Mars. I want to live here. So thanks again for watching. I'm John Torres with Florida Today newspaper and FloridaToday.com. We are part of the USA Today network. Thanks again.